Posted by you/no_links 3857. I, 28F, was woken up this morning because the sheets I was lying on were wet. I assumed our child, 6F, had had an accident, but when I checked where the wetness came from, to my surprise, it turned out it wasn't her but my husband who had wet the bed. After I had taken a shower, I woke him up and told him he'd wet the bed. At first, he denied it, but then I guess he realized he indeed had, as he got this mortified look on his face, jumped right out of bed and started trying to rip the bedding off. Since we have pull-on sheets and our child was sleeping on the other side, he didn't manage to get them off. It looked ridiculous and honestly quite funny, so I chuckled. He angrily told me it wasn't funny, so I stopped. By that point, the only thing his pulling of the sheets had accomplished was waking up our child, who was confused and asked what was going on. He didn't say anything, just idiotically continued trying to get the sheets off. Since he didn't reply, I told her he'd wet the bed. At that, he froze and gave me this weird look, almost like he was about to cry or something. Our child asked why he had wet the bed, and since he was still completely silent, I said something along the lines of, "Sometimes accidents happen." He just stood there staring at me. I'm not exaggerating when I say he looked at me with pure hatred. I've never been afraid of him, but for a second or two, I thought he might hit me. Then he just dropped the things he'd managed to get off the bed on the floor, left the room, and locked himself in the bathroom for about 45 minutes. When he came out, he got dressed in a hurry and just left, saying, "You can take her to school." He didn't even look at me. His behavior really annoyed me, but I just let him be, as I didn't want to argue with him when he was in such a bad mood. When I got home from work, he was still sulking and basically ignored me. I was still annoyed with him from the morning, so his behavior irritated me even more. I told him to get over it, that wetting the bed wasn't the end of the world, and to stop taking it out on me. At that, he accused me of humiliating him when I told our child. I found that utterly ridiculous on so many levels, so I angrily told him that he humiliated himself by wetting the bed, not me. He didn't take that too well, said "F you," and went off to his computer, and now he refuses to talk to me. I just feel confused. I think he's the one who behaved poorly and immaturely, and I don't think I did anything wrong. The last thing I said may have been harsh, but I feel like he had it coming. Yet, I still wonder if I was mean to him. Am I wrong here? Edit. I just want to clarify that I did not tell our child to be mean or to humiliate my husband. I told her because I didn't know what else to say, and since it was quite obvious what had happened, I thought it was best to be honest. I didn't say it in a humiliating way, just as a matter of fact, without making a big deal about it. I didn't think my husband would feel that bad about it. Update 2 days later. Thanks to everyone who helped me see the situation from my husband's perspective and made me realize that I'm the jerk, or worse. I reread my original post, and there are some things I'd like to elaborate on before I share the update. I did feel empathy and I did care about my husband. I was gentle when I told him after waking him up. However, his reaction caught me off guard, and the time from when he got up from bed until he locked himself in the bathroom couldn't have been more than a minute. After that, I felt it was best to leave him alone. I know I was the jerk for telling our child, but I didn't do it to be mean or to humiliate him. It was a stupid, wrongful decision. I regret it. Further, it's not easy to show someone you care when you're being ignored. I did text him after he left and asked if he was okay, but he left it on read. I asked him again when I got home, but he didn't answer. I asked him if we could talk about it, no answer. I asked him if he could at least tell me why he was so mad at me, no answer. I gave up and went to make dinner. After dinner, I asked him if he could stop ignoring me, still no answer. I asked if he wanted me to leave, to which he replied, "You can stay, I don't care." So I asked again if he would stop ignoring me if I stayed, and when he said no, I'd had enough. While I don't think ignoring someone like that is okay, I know I handled it really badly. I do feel awful for being outright mean to him. Anyway, I texted him early this morning to say that I was truly sorry and asked if he was willing to talk after work so I could apologize. He texted back okay around noon. We met up at home, and understandably, he was cold and didn't say much. I apologized for everything, for laughing, for telling our child, for telling him to get over it, and, most of all, for saying he humiliated himself, which I'm most ashamed of. He stayed silent the entire time, and when I finished, he just asked why I told our child. I explained, and after that, we just sat in silence for what felt like forever. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "I scared you, right?" I told him that, briefly. He did. He said he could feel that. I asked what made him react so strongly, but he didn't know. He just said that he panicked when he realized he'd wet the bed, and it got even worse when I told our child. He admitted that he just got so angry with me for it. I apologized again for making him feel that way, and he apologized for making me scared. I'm not going to go through everything we said after that. It was a long talk, but in conclusion, neither of us is happy with how we acted, and we both apologized. He wasn't too bothered by me laughing, but we both agreed that I shouldn't have told our child. However, he's no longer mad about it and doesn't think it's that big of a deal anymore. We both agreed that he shouldn't have ignored me like that and that I handled it poorly and was mean. We've accepted each other's apologies, though I still feel bad for being so mean to him. But overall, we're on good terms now. Second update 9 months later. To address some concerns about why my husband wet the bed, since he was sober, I did try to get him to see a doctor after so many of you suggested it. But he outright refused, claiming it would be pointless since they wouldn't do anything anyway. He's wet the bed one other time that I know of, and both times he was exhausted and stressed out, so that might have been the reason. I'm not sure. This is getting long, so if you're just here to read about my husband divorcing me, you can stop reading now. My second post was written just after I had apologized. Based on the initial response to my first post, I concluded that I must be an awful person, and I felt really bad for him. But honestly, I never felt that my initial actions were that bad, and I still don't. I'm not saying I didn't deserve any of the hate I got, I surely did, but some of it was just vile. Some of the things I was hated for never even happened, but were imagined by commenters. However, since the outcome of my actions was so horrible and I never intended to hurt him, I genuinely felt bad for doing so. My apology was sincere, and at the time of the second post, I was happy we were back on speaking terms and hoped we could put this behind us. It turned out I couldn't put it behind me, and shortly after, I realized I was still bothered by his behavior. I also began receiving more comments from people who saw issues with his behavior as well, which I'm grateful for as it reassured me that it was problematic. What I purposely omitted from my first post, as I wanted unbiased opinions, is that my husband can be a bit unstable at times. He can be very immature and sensitive, has difficulty controlling his emotions, especially anger, and he's hard to understand sometimes. It's likely due to mental health issues, so it isn't fair to him, and I feel awful for it, but sometimes I just find him so annoying and exhausting. I guess I got called out on that in my first post. At the time, he'd been in contact with a mental health team for years, but if it wasn't for them prescribing his medications, he would have cut contact with them a long time ago. Anyway, I was already a bit tired of always having to cater to his moods and him not doing enough to address his issues. His weird, over-the-top, and, in my opinion, threatening reaction to wetting the bed and me telling our child just felt like too much, even though I knew he was hurt. As I mentioned before, I had never felt threatened by him before, so the fact that I did this time really bothered me, even though he didn't actually do anything. I made some attempts to talk with him again about what happened, especially why he got so angry that it made me feel threatened. I even asked him if his reaction had anything to do with wetting the bed as a child, based on some theories from the comments about him possibly being shamed for it growing up. But he just said it didn't, and it was clear he didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to push. He's so difficult to talk to when it comes to things like emotions or relationship issues, which can be really frustrating for me. To be honest, I even had some thoughts about whether I wanted to stay in this marriage, but they weren't that serious at the time. Then, about a week before Christmas, he unexpectedly attempted to take his own life. Sadly not his first. I didn't see it coming, and I still feel awful about it, I probably always will. His memory of the hours before is blurry, but he insists he didn't intend to hurt himself when he left our home that night. Still, I feel like I should have known. It was really bad, and for a while, we didn't know if he was going to survive or what condition he'd be in if he did. Thankfully, he pulled through without any major long-term effects. But the time after was horrible, and when he finally came home, he was so unwell that he was basically lethargic for weeks. As for why he did it, the short answer is that he had an overwhelming amount of anxiety that he just wanted to go away, and that mixed badly with his occasional lack of impulse control. He's made it very clear that it had nothing to do with anything I had done. I didn't know how badly he was feeling because he didn't tell me, or anyone else, and it's so frustrating trying to help him when he doesn't open up about how he's feeling. It scared the hell out of me, and it scared him too, to the point where he finally realized he needed more help. Since then, he's been more serious about getting help than ever before. When he was offered therapy, he accepted it. The waiting time is ridiculous, though, so he won't start until October. In the meantime, he's been seeing a nurse and a psychiatrist. By April, he was pretty much back to normal and returned to work. In early May, we found out I was pregnant. It was definitely not planned and happened because we messed up with birth control. Despite all the obvious reasons why we should have considered terminating the pregnancy, we decided to go through with it. It wasn't a decision we took lightly, but it was what we both wanted. I should add that he was a complete mess during my first pregnancy, and the second one was hard for him too. We also have a 4-year-old in addition to our 6-year-old. But for some reason that escapes me now, we thought things would be different this time around. And for a while, things were different. At 12 weeks, We found out we weren't expecting just one baby, but two. I know it sounds awful, but I'd be lying if I said we were initially happy about it. By that point, though, we were already committed to having a baby, so we both decided to go along with it. After we processed the news, we actually became kind of excited. I'm 23 weeks pregnant now, and up until yesterday, things had been overall pretty good. But when he got home from work yesterday, he was in a crappy mood. I assumed he'd had a bad day at work, but when I asked him about it, he went off on an angry rant about how stupid we were for deciding to have the babies and that we should have terminated them. I was shocked, like WTF, and when I asked why he was saying that and pointed out how hurtful it was, he just said, "Well, you asked, and that's what I feel." I didn't want to talk with him when he was in that state, so I told him we'd discuss it later. When the kids were asleep, I asked him what that was all about and where it came from. He said he didn't know, but in the way he says it when he doesn't want to talk about something. I tried to push a little, but got nowhere, so I got frustrated and told him it wasn't fair to say things like that and then refused to talk about it. He stayed silent for a while, then just said, "F this," and locked himself in the bathroom. When he came out, he looked sad, so I asked him if he was okay. He said he needed some air, and I was like, okay, but added something like, "It's okay to be sad, you know." He didn't take that well and angrily told me he wasn't sad. I know I should have let it go, but I had a bad feeling, so I asked him to stay. That made him even angrier, and he screamed at me that he didn't want to effing stay, then slammed the door so hard that it woke the kids up when he left. I couldn't do much else but tend to the kids, pretend everything was fine, and hope he would return safe and sound. I was so worried that, once the kids were back asleep, I texted him to ask if he was okay, and then I cried. He replied almost instantly, saying, "I'm okay, home in 5, sorry, love you," which eased my worry, but I was still sad and angry. He came back shortly after, clearly high, which had calmed him down. He isn't addicted. When he saw I was crying, he apologized. I told him I'm not okay with how he treats me, the usual stuff. He acknowledged it, apologized again, and we've had that conversation before. I realized I wasn't even angry anymore, perhaps I should have been. I just asked him to please not run off like that again, and he promised he wouldn't. But I know he probably will. Then he said he was tired, so we went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I haven't been feeling great today, to be honest. I'm scared, disappointed, and I feel really stupid. My husband was in a better mood when he came home today, and he's been such a sweetheart. He even talked to me. He apologized for yesterday and told me he was disappointed in himself for how he acted, saying he's been trying so hard to behave like a normal person, his words, and that he's tired of feeling like he's failing all the time. I know he's trying, and he's not failing all the time, so I told him not to be so hard on himself. I asked him how he was feeling, and he admitted he wasn't feeling that well but couldn't elaborate. So I asked him how bad not that well was, and he said it wasn't too bad, that I didn't need to worry, and he promised to tell me if it got worse. But honestly, I don't know if I can trust him on that. I'm so scared he's going to crash again. I'm not sure I have the energy for it, not now, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't have it either. I'm really hoping therapy will help him, but I don't know what to realistically expect. What if it doesn't make a difference? What do we do then? I know my posts have mostly focused on the negative, but I love my husband so much, and I don't want to live without him. But I don't want to live like this either. Maybe I'm just being overly sensitive right now because I'm pregnant, but it feels overwhelming.